My editing portfolio has over 650 million views, and I can tell you that it's not the editing that makes people stop scrolling, it's the motion graphics. And the ones that Kallaway uses are a perfect example. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to create them step by step. And I broke this video down into 3 different sections. Firstly, we will start with this 3D pillar animation. Then, we will move on to this money motion graphic. And finally, I'll show you how to create this isometric character animation. So make sure to block out some time in your calendar and save this video because you are about to master Kallaway style motion graphics. So let's start with this 3D pillar animation. First, we're going to have to set up the 3D pillars. So I'm going to import the GLB models and duplicate them twice. Now, I'm going to move one pillar to the right and the other to the left and make them align. Select the right and the left pillar and select P for position to drag them behind the middle pillar in the center. This creates depth and gives us that 3-point perspective. Okay, so next we're going to create some of the gradient lighting. So go to your timeline panel, right click, select New, Light, Spotlight, and select the color blue. Now, select the spotlight and using your cursor, try to move it to the right, adjust the light and intensity to your liking, using the opacity. Next, select Spotlight 1 and duplicate it. Now, duplicate Spotlight 2 and select Spotlight 3 and move it to the left so that it can reach between the left pillar and the middle pillar. Change the color to purple and adjust the opacity to your liking. Now add another light and make it far back to the left so you can reach the left pillar and make it also purple. So as you can see, I basically use lighting for the coloring of this whole composition. And now we're going to build the floor that you can see here. So, click on the rectangle tool, double click on it twice so that I can make a full screen rectangle, enable a 3D option and also motion blur. Now rotate the rectangle around 90 degrees and make it beneath the pillars so that it can look like the base floor. We want to use it as a floor and also as a shadow for our pillars. Make sure you're selecting the shape layer, aka the floor. Now click on the icon next to the scale properties to enable a uniform scale so that we can stretch the floor. After making sure the floor perspective is to our liking, we can change the color of the shape to a darker color. And so going back to our timeline panel, we're going to right click again, click on New, and now we're going to click on Camera. Change the preset to 24mm and press OK. Right click again in the timeline panel, create a new null object, enable 3D and parent the camera layer to the null. So we're almost done with the fundamentals of our effect. We just have a few more tweaks to do before we can start adding the fun animations to this project. So now let's move on to the camera push-in effect. So make sure your null is selected, then press P for position and drag it far so that we can start keyframing the animation. Zoom out using the position value and click on a stopwatch to make the start of the keyframe far from the pillars and move the frame to the beginning of the timeline, and then make a new keyframe at the end of the animation and zoom in until you are close to the pillars. So now select the 2 keyframes and press F9 to ease them. Then apply the Bezier curve. The Bezier curve gives us smooth acceleration and deceleration. So press Ctrl T on your keyboard for new text, then type 3, and now select the text layer and press Ctrl Alt Home button so that you can make the anchor point in the center. Then scale the text up and add your desired font. Now drop the text layer beneath the 3 pillars so that it will look like it's behind them rather than in front of them, and make sure the text layer is selected to enable the 3D and the motion blur. Then adjust its positioning to make it look centered, change the color of the text to white so that the light can reflect its gradient, and after doing that, adjust the text rotation and position to make it look good. Now we're going to animate the text layer using the script text evo 2. So we're going to select the plus icon on the script and then lower the opacity and adjust the blur values so that we can have our animation. After that, we're going to select each pillar of our 3 pillars and press T for opacity. Then we're going to click on the stopwatch, make a keyframe at 0 in the timeline and turn it to 0%. Then move a few frames forward and make it 100 so that we can make a fade in animation. Select the opacity keyframes, again press F9 to ease them and drag the keyframes around to make it fade in a little bit slower. Now we're going to do the scene transition setup. So select all the layers in the timeline and make a cut so that we can transition to the next scene. Right click on the timeline panel, add a new adjustment layer and add the effect called camera lens blur. Go to the effects control panel, click on the stopwatch on blur radius and change it to 5. Move the keyframe to the beginning of the timeline and move again a few frames. Set a new keyframe and make the value 0. Now we're going to select all of our layers and pre-compose them together. Then I imported a grain MOV file. I'm going to change the opacity to overlay and I'm going to go back into our effect. So now we're going to add this background shape. I'm going to create a new dark grey solid and position it down the bottom of our composition. Turn it into a 3D layer and scale it up. Okay, now I'm going to go back into the main composition, and this might get a little confusing, so just bear with me. You see, pre-comp 1 is basically the entire effect. Now what I want to do is I want to do a hard cut camera zoom, and to do that, I'm just going to duplicate pre-comp 1 so that we have 2 pre-compositions. I'm going to click on reveal layer source in project, and then I'm going to drag pre-comp 2 back into the composition. And the reason, by the way, why I revealed it in project is so that I can edit pre-comp 2 2 inside of the composition, because if I edit something inside of pre-comp 2, it's not going to affect the original pre-comp. However, if I never done this, reveal the pre-comp in the project, these two pre-comps would have been connected, meaning I can't edit one without editing the other. I'm going to open up pre-comp 2. I went into the camera settings and I just changed the preset to 20 millimeters. This is what's going to give us that hard cut kind of a feel. I'm also going to adjust the null positions. So as you can see, we have the hard cut, but it looks a bit too harsh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of extend the pre-compositions above each other, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of an opacity fade in and a fade out. Then I'm going to click P on the keyboard to open up position, and I'm going to do sort of a slide out position for this last section over here. Then with pre-comp 2 selected, I'm going to look for the motion tile effect. I'm going to change the output width to 333 and the output height to 333, enable mirror edges, and then drag motion tile to the very top. Now I'm going to do this same thing once again where I duplicate the pre-composition so that we have another pre-comp in the timeline in order to create one more camera cut. So I'm going to drag it to the end, enable position, and this time I'm going to slide it in. So basically the opposite slide that we just had. Open up the gradient ramp and easy keyframes. Once again, I'm going to apply the same exact motion tile effect. And this time I'm going to go inside of pre-composition 3 and remove the two pillars. And then I'm just changing the text from 3 to 1 and positioning it behind the main pillar. So now we have a slide from the 3 pillars to the 1 pillar. Now I'm just going to create an adjustment layer and add the camera lens blur effect to it. Now I'm going to open up pre-comp 3 and I'm going to mess around with the pillar position so that it's kind of at an angle, floating off the ground and rotating like so. Then I'm going to duplicate the pillar a bunch of times and make a lot of cuts. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to match the position of 1 to the same position that the pillar is going to be in, and then make a hard cut so that it looks like the pillar just turns into a 1. And once we have that done, I'm going to duplicate the text 1, position it underneath 1 and just type in skill. And using text evo 2, we will add the fade in animation. And there we go. Now you can see on screen what this effect looks like, and we're ready to move on to the second effect. But just before we do that, if you are enjoying the content, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to see more high-level editing content like this one, then just click the link down below the video to check out the editing evolution. So I started by importing a white solid layer, and now I'm going to create a rectangle. And this rectangle has no fill, but it has a stroke of about 17 pixels. Now I'm going to press S to open up the scale property and basically add in a scale up effect. Ease the layers and make it fast at the start and slow at the end. Then we're going to select the pen tool, start at the bottom left and go sort of to the top left, and click and hold on the points that we selected to make this little curve. Then position that just outside of the rectangle. I'm going to parent the line to the rectangle we just created, and I'm going to enable the motion blur in both layers. Now I'm going to open up the line and add trim paths effect. Then I'm going to move the end to 0, add a keyframe, move down the composition a bit, and then finish the end just before it hits the rectangle. I'm going to move a little bit further, and this time I'm going to finish the trim paths so that we have 3 keyframes. One at 0 when the keyframe is coming in, then it slows down, and then it finishes the effect at the end. I'm going to ease the keyframes, and that's looking good. Then I'm just going to play around with the keyframes, size, and positioning of everything to make it smooth. Now I'm going to duplicate the rectangle and create a mask just around the point of the contact between the line and the rectangle. I'm going to disable the main rectangle just so that we can see what we're masking. And then I'm going to add the CC pixel poly effect onto this new rectangle. Then I'm going to move this masked rectangle to the moment in which the line hits the rectangle. Now I'm going to change the force, gravity, and force center so that the pixels fly up when the line hits it. Then I basically copied the mask that we just made for this new rectangle. I pasted it onto the main rectangle and I inverted it. Now I'm going to duplicate the masked rectangle and make a cut at the point in which the crack happens, just to fill in that gap that we just made by inverting the mask. And then I'm just going to remove the pixel poly effect from this first masked rectangle. So now as you can see, we have the effect where the line breaks through the rectangle. Now I'm going to change the color of the line to green, and I'll turn down the stroke of the line. Then I'll select all of these lines that we just created and pre-compose them. Now I'm going to duplicate this pre-composition in order to create more hard-cut camera effects, kind of like we did in the previous effect. So in this second composition, I'm basically going to start by being on the bottom left and then move our way up as the line proceeds to hit the corner of the rectangle. Then I'll obviously ease the keyframes once again, go into Graph Editor and apply a smooth motion throughout. And once again, when the line hits the rectangle, I'm going to duplicate the pre-composition in order to have one more hard-cut camera zoom. Now I'm going to create an adjustment layer, position that over the cut between the second and third pre-comp, and add the camera lens blur effect. And the keyframes for the blur radius are going to be 0, 10, and 0. Then I'm going to duplicate this adjustment layer and position it over the first cut as well. I'm also going to add the transform effect, add a keyframe for the position, and move it slightly left and right just to give it a bit of a shake. I'm going to increase the size of the white solid because it's kind of going out of the edges, and let's see what that looks like. Nice. Okay, now I'm going to press Command T to enable text, and then I'm going to type in "you can actually." I'm going to move that to the center and change the color to black. back, and then change the font to the one you're seeing on screen. Now that we have the text, we're going to open up the first pre-composition and then parent the text to the rectangle so that it moves along with the rectangle. I'm going to add this animator effect, and we're going to just speed it up a little bit just to have some sort of a text animation, but you can use Animation Composer or you can just do these manually yourself if you want. Now, still inside of the pre-comp 1 where our main rectangle is, I'm going to duplicate the text at the moment of the haircut, and I'm going to change it to say scale your income. I'll change the color to green, and I'll make sure that it's visible when the haircut camera changes. Now, as you can see, I also positioned the text in the same position as the first one so that your eyes can easily follow and read along. And then I'm going to do something similar for the third text, basically going to duplicate the text and position it sort of closer to where the camera is going. Then I'm going to make sure that the timing is right, so I'm going to move it a bit earlier, and I'm going to do one more text just outside of the rectangle. Same exact concept that we just done. Now I'm just going to adjust the position and size of all of the texts so that they make sense when the camera keeps changing and panning to another location. And once you're happy with the text, we're going to import the 3D model of the cache, which is sort of what the whole final effect kind of revolves around. So we're going to import this GLB file. So I'm going to play around with all the rotations and orientations to make sure that we can see that what we're working with. And I'm going to position it somewhere in the center of the screen. Once we're happy with it, I'm going to copy it and open up the pre-comp 2 and paste it inside of there. So now I'm going to add some keyframes to make it look like the cache is flying into the rectangle. And then I'm going to ease the keyframes so that it goes fast at the start and then slow at the end. Now I'm going to pre-compose just the cache so I can add a tritone effect onto it. I'm going to change the color to green, but I'm going to turn down the blend with original to about 75 so that we can still see the other colors. Then I'm going to apply a curves effect and bring it down slightly. Now the cache is kind of interfering with our text, so I'm going to move around everything accordingly. And I'm also going to add a linear wipe effect onto the cache. Okay, so now for the second haircut, I'm going to duplicate the pre-compositioned cache, and I'm going to rotate it about 90 degrees so that it's sort of in the corner. We're going to extend it just so that it doesn't disappear. And once again, I'm just going to do a bunch of tweaking, which I'm not going to explain here. I'm just tweaking all the eases, all of the positions, everything, just so that this feels like a smooth motion graphic animation. And there you have it. This is what the animation turned out to look like. But now we're about to move on to my favorite animation and possibly the hardest animation as well. So make sure that you block out some time for this one and pay attention. And by the way, if you want to see the video in which these animations were made for, then click the link down below and check out the video for the editing evolution, because that's essentially why these animations even exist. So let's move on to the third animation, which is this isometric character animation. So I'm going to start by creating a new solid. I'm going to make this light blue. Then we're going to go up and create a gray square. We're going to position that square in the center, open it up, scale it up, and enable motion blur. Next, I'm going to create an ellipse in the middle and change the color to dark blue. Then I'm going to add the pucker and bloat effect by clicking on add, and I'm going to change the amount to about 23. And I'm going to change the shape color to white and create two small circles above the blue circle that we just created. Then I'm going to select the pen tool and draw a sort of mouth shape for our guy. And I'm going to do that by disabling the fill color and enabling the stroke to white. Now, as you can see, we have our character that's going to be included in the final animation. I'm going to rename all the layers and then parent them to the main shape layer so that they're all stuck together. Now I'm going to add some keyframes to the shape and rotation of our shape. And I'm basically going to have him rotate in and scale up with these expressions that you can see on screen. I'll leave a link to all the expressions used in this video down below. So now I'm going to play around with the rotation and scale to make this bounce in very smooth. And then I'm going to ease all the keyframes. Go into the graph editor and just smoothen them out. Now I'm going to click on the mouth shape and I'm going to create keyframes for the opacity and position. Then I'm going to open up the main shape that we just added expressions onto, and I'm going to copy the expressions and paste them onto the position of the mouth. This will give a nice little bounce effect to the mouth. Then I'm going to shift click on left eye and right eye, click P on the keyboard and add keyframes that will make the eyes look to the right and then back in the middle. Ease those keyframes and smoothen them out in the graph editor. Now I'm going to click on the left eye, press S on the keyboard to enable scale, deselect the uniform scale, and the first keyframe I'm going to basically set to 0 so that it makes it look like the eye is closed and then it opens up. Now I'm going to add the same expression to the shape layer for a scale to give it that nice smooth bounce. If we open up the expression, we can also smoothen out some of these keyframes, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to touch up all the keyframes and positions accordingly. Okay, now that we have this done, I'm going to duplicate the shape layer, but this time I'm going to make the color dark blue. And I'm going to sort of create a little mask inside of our shape here. And then I'm going to just feather it out just a little bit. This will basically create a blue gradient on our shape. I'm going to turn on the opacity a little bit and I'm going to parent it to the main shape. Then I'm just going to parent the main shape to the box. I'm going to deselect the uniform scale from the box or the uniform size. And I'm going to create some keyframes in order to have the box move up. Once again, pasting the expressions onto the box. I'm going to make the mouth a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to play around with that a bit. Then I'm going to increase the stroke so that it's more prevalent. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the rounded rectangle tool and create a blue rectangle down the bottom of the main square. Then I'm going to duplicate it 2 times, and I'm going to turn down the opacity of the bottom rectangle. Then the middle rectangle, which is full opacity, is going to be positioned just above the bottom rectangle. And I'm going to track matte the top one to the middle one. Now the top one is going to be positioned more so to the left, and when we're going to move it later in the animation, it's going to make it look like a loading bar. So now I'm just going to adjust the position of the top one, move along the composition, and have it move from left to right. Now I'm just going to parent the bottom rectangle to the main square so that it moves along with the animation. As we can see, it looks very nice. I'm also just going to do some position and opacity effects, something very simple, just moving it from left to right. And once again, I'm going to paste the same expression that we always use to give it that smooth bounce effect. Okay, with that done, I'm going to press Command T and type in 15. I'm going to change the font and change the color to blue. Then I'm going to click on the top rectangle. Then I'm going to change the layer style to gradient overlay. Open up the gradient overlay and change it to this blue gradient. Now I'm going to parent the text to the main shape once again, and I'm going to add the text evo effect onto it. This will sort of fade in the text. And then I'll add the slider control effect. Now I'm going to open up the source text and parent it to the slider control. Then we're going to paste this expression that you can see on screen, or once again, it's going to be in the description below. And I'm going to add some keyframes on the slider control so that it goes from 0 to 15. Now I'm going to add another text saying level, and I'll make it black. Then I'll just position that underneath the blue rectangle, parent that to the main shape, of course, and add another opacity fade in. Now, if we want to move anything around, we just got to make sure that we move the layer that everything else is parented to. So in our case, the main shape layer has all the other shapes parented to it. So since I wanted to move the texts and the shapes, I just needed to select the main shape and the text to move it all at once. Now I'm going to move further into our composition and basically open up the position and scale properties and make it look like the rectangle is sort of disappearing in the background by making it a lot smaller. Then I'm going to duplicate the box and I'm going to parent the track matte to that square so that when the square gets smaller, everything else basically disappears. Now I'm going to select the main and the 2 shape layers, and I'm going to have them not parented to anything because I want to pre-compose them. So I'm going to create a new pre-composition with them, and then I'll also track matte them to the box. I'm also going to track matte the text 15 and level so that when the box changes, everything disappears nice and smoothly like so. Now I'm going to open up the position of our main character over here and create a new keyframe for position and scale so that when the box gets smaller, we're going to position him kind of on top of the box. But instead of having a linear motion to our character getting smaller, I'm going to create this curve so that he kind of floats around more so and then lands on the square. As always, going to ease the keyframes, and then we're also going to add a slight rotation keyframe. Now, since we're not using some of these layers, I'm basically going to cut out the end of them. Now I'm going to duplicate the box, and when the character lands on the box, we're basically going to add the same expression we've been adding to give him that little jump animation on the actual box itself. I'm also going to create new text that says join, and I'm going to position that in the center of this rectangle. I'm going to parent that to the new box that we just created. Now I'm going to duplicate the text and change it to say joined. So when the character hits the box, it changes from join to joined. And as always, I'm going to add the same bounce expression like we did previously. I'm going to add the text evo effect to create this opacity in transition. And then I'm going to duplicate the box once again and add the 4 color gradient to it. I'm going to change the colors to be sort of this blue theme. And so basically when the character hits the box, it's going to change the text and it's going to change the color. Now, since the text isn't visible, I'm going to change it to white because we added this color gradient. Now I'm going to click on the rounded rectangle once again. And this time I'm going to create a mask around our square over here. I'm going to extend the edges of this mask to cover the entire square. I'm going to keyframe this mask path. So basically we're going to start off with a small square and it's going to increase in size over the next couple of frames. This is just going to enable a bit of a smoother motion to this effect. I'm also going to enable a bit of a mask feather to make it look a bit smoother. And as always, ease the keyframes and make some adjustments in the graph editor much smoother. Next up, I'm going to select the pen tool and I'm going to enable a gradient stroke, make it blue and purple. And I'm going to add a trim path effect where it starts off at 0, ends up at 100. And then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to start at 100 and end at 0. So it's just like this little fluid line effect, which basically acts kind of as recoil or debris after the character hits the rectangle. So I'm going to duplicate that, reposition it so that we have more of them, and change the length of it as well to be on the left side. Now I'm just going to add the motion blur onto it so that it's a bit smoother. As always, in between all of this, I'm just going to play around with keyframes, positioning, etc., just to make sure everything's always smooth. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to create one more keyframe where the character is basically way off into the right. So I'm going to adjust the positions and scales to kind of move them to the right. Then I'm going to add the vertex tool so that I can make this movement curved. Now I'm going to select the mouth and both of the eyes and I kind of move them to the left. So as he moves to the right, the mouth and eyes look to the left. Then I'm going to click on some of the points and I'm going to adjust the handles so that this movement is even smoother. Now I'm going to adjust the box so that as the character moves to the right, the box is basically going to scale down. Now I'm going to start adding some more effects. So I'm going to add the deep glow effect and set the exposure to 0.01. And I applied that on the purple glow of the joined button. I'm going to add the same glow onto our character over here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the ellipse tool, and I'm going to create a big circle around our character to the right over here. Then I'm going to duplicate that circle, making sure that it's just a stroke that is selected. And I'm going to create 3 of these circles. Then I'm going to parent all of them to our character over here. Now I'm going to enable the scale keyframe, and I'm going to have them scale up as the character moves to the right. Now I'm going to import this GLB of this big magnet over here, reposition it, and add time multiplied by 40 effect onto the Z rotation so that it's spinning. Then I'm going to pre-compose it, add the motion blur to it, and add the tritone effect. Change the color to blue, and then I'm going to parent it to our character once again. Now I'm going to enable the scale position, and once again have it scale up as the character moves to the right. You want to introduce new objects and new scenes as something else is moving, basically, because it allows you to add this smooth transition to a new object. That's why during the fastest moment of an animation is when you want to make a hard cut or import something new or scale something in, slide something in, etc. So that's why we're doing it at this time. Now I'm going to create a new composition, call it client face, and then I'm going to copy and paste the eyes and the mouth. I'm going to make the mouth a little bit bigger to make it look like it's smiling. Then I'm going to import a white rectangle, place it behind the mouth and eyes, and add a slight purple gradient to it. I'm going to make the square bigger. Then I'll duplicate the square, and on the duplicated square I'll create a mask on the left side of our character over here. Now I'm just going to feather that a little bit more. I'm just doing this to add a bit of a stronger blue gradient. Okay, but going back into our main composition, I'm going to bring in the client, I'm going to scale him down, and now we're basically going to try and make it look like the magnet is attracting all these clients. So I'm going to do that with some very simple position and scale keyframes. As always, going to ease them, and once it hits the magnet, I'm going to add this kind of scale down effect to make the shape disappear. Then I'm going to add the warp effect, set it to fish, and add 7 blend, 15 horizontal distortion, and 13 vertical distortion. And then I'm going to keyframe the vertical distortion to go from 13 to about -56. So now I'm just going to clone our client over here, but this time I'm going to position him to go to the bottom of the magnet instead of the top. Now I'm going to apply the vertex tool and basically have the motion path of these 2 clients be a little bit curved. And I'm going to start just duplicating the clients to get way more of them. So I'm going to spread them evenly throughout the composition. And I'm also going to change the scale of the magnet when the clients hit the magnet. So as we can see now, we have the square, then it changes the join button, then it moves to the right, it attracts the magnet, and the magnet attracts leads in which they scale the magnet as they hit it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the circle on the right in the back, open up its ellipse contents, and I'm going to remove the 2 just so that we have 1. Now instead of this 1, keyframe the size so it goes from 0 to its original size. Ease the keyframes, and then I'm going to change the opacity so that it fades in as well. So now the circle expands and it fades out. Once that's done, I'm just going to duplicate these circles and move them to match the time of when the client hits the magnet. So now I'm going to change some of the positioning of our character with our magnet so that it's kind of moving to the left. Now I'm going to pre-compose everything together, and I'm going to play around with the scale so that it scales in and out at certain moments. Okay, I'm going to go back into the pre-composition and add some text saying complete beginners with 0 editing experience, and I'm going to position that under our original square, then parent it to the box. Now, just like we done with the previous effects, I'm going to add some basic text animations on screen, and then I'm going to create another text further down into the composition when we have the landing client section. And once again, just going to add some basic text animations. And again, just like you've seen in the previous effects, I'm going to duplicate a pre-composition to add this hard cut camera effect. So during the end, I'm going to basically do a heavy zoom in onto the magnet with our character to the right. Then to finish it off, I'm going to add an adjustment layer and add the camera lens blur like we done before. And there you have it. That's our animation. As you can see, all 3 animations came out very nice, and you can use these to charge much higher prices for your edits. Now, I've been using AI as a video editor for the last 2 years, maybe even 3. And if you want to learn exactly my workflow for using AI as a video editor, just click the video up here.